Let me ask you something before we get started. Have you ever cleaned up your life and then watched it get messy again the same way it was messy before? Same arguments, same setbacks, same Sunday night promises, same Thursday night failures. Different years, same life. Most people think that's a discipline problem. It's not. And tonight I can prove it to you. Here's what we're doing in this episode. I'm going to show you 5 things, and I'll be honest with you. The first 2, you're going to nod your head and go along with it because you've heard it before. But right around the 3rd one, something is going to click that reframes every failed attempt at change you've ever made. And by the 4th, this is the one I really need you to hear. You're going to see the design God actually built for transformation. And while almost everybody, including a whole lot of church folk, has been working against that design their entire lives. And then at the very end, I'm going to hand you something free that took me years to build. A tool that will show you personally in about 8 minutes the exact place your renewal needs to begin. Not where mine began, yours. So don't you dare leave early, because the whole episode points to the last 5 minutes. Oh yeah, I'm Dwayne Dwyer, the mindset coach. This is Coach's Corner. Let's talk about the mind that creates your life.
Hey, mindset shift, go. Yeah, we locked in tight. Clean heart, new life. Bass hit, feel right. Fake talk all night. Coach's Corner wave. We don't drift, we brave. Pressure make praise. We don't chase, we pray. Mindset Academy. Built on legacy. Turn pain to recipe. Now it's joy and energy. Hands up, no fear. New steps right here. If you hear that call, you can stand up tall. From the fight to the win. Yeah. Let the change begin. Mindset shift, go. Renew your mind, go. We move with the light. We shine in the night. Mindset shift, go. Renew your mind, go. Coach's Corner sound. Make the whole room bounce. Kingdom in my talk. Purpose in my walk. Always cut off. New grace won't stop. Hustle with a halo. Peace when the day's cold. Joy in my payload. Hope in my base load. The mindset goes speak. Truth make me leap. Heart set on me. But my praise go deep. From the head to the feet. Let it all.
Good evening and welcome to this week's episode of Coach's Corner. As always, it is an honor to be able to share a conversation with you guys. Be able to come here and connect with you guys and get to see you guys in the comment section and looking at some of the things that you're typing. So again, I'm putting this up front. Make sure that you hit that like button. Make sure that you subscribe if you have not yet subscribed, and make sure that you are an active participant of this conversation. We greatly appreciate you being here. You could be anyplace else, but you chose to be here with us this evening, and we do not take that lightly. So whether you're on Facebook, whether you're on Instagram, whether you're on LinkedIn, whether you're on YouTube, it doesn't really matter. Just let us know that you're here so that we can give you your flowers now. Also, again, your perspective matters. Your questions matter. So put them in the comment section. That way, not only I can see them, but other people can see them as well, and we can comment on them. Last but not least, this weekend coming up, we have 4 days. If you have not received your ticket as of yet, go ahead and scan that QR code and get your seat so that you can be a part of this upcoming webinar. I'm telling you, it's going to be good. I'm looking forward to it. I have something planned, and I hope you guys will like it. So there's some changes happening, like some of you guys already know. You've seen some of those changes already. The beginning of this show is one of those changes. It's going to be a change at the end as well. So I hope you guys stick around for that. And again, I'm excited. I'm excited at what the future is holding for the Mindset Academy. So make sure that you are a part of the Mindset Academy so that you can be a part of the changes and the change that's going to happen in you. The way this academy is structured, the academy is structured to be a facilitator of change. The academy is, right? The academy itself will be a facilitator of change. So regardless of what echelon of growth that you're looking at doing, whether you want to be 1% one-on-one coaching, or whether you say, hey, you know what, I'm not ready for full-fledged coaching. Yes, let me do the self-paced thing. So the academy has all of that in between that spectrum. So make sure that you are a part of the academy. And if not, trust me, I think you want to. Now, That brings me to the topic of today's conversation. And today's conversation is all about mindset. And if you know me, which I believe most of you do, right? I have been focusing on mindset now for some years. And I think all of that has gotten me to this point, right? And I do not take that lightly. It allows me to be a lot more understanding and compassionate where need be. And I make sure that I stress that. And so, what I want to do is kind of have this conversation, and I want to point you back to the introductory because you guys seen something different, and that thing that you've seen different is really the foundation in which I build this conversation on. Not just this conversation, but conversations to come. So it works to your favor. So first and foremost, I want to kind of start off by letting everybody know that our first talking point is all about your life is the printout of your thoughts. Now, kind of let that set in for a second. Your life is the printout of your thoughts. And I think that's key because, in no uncertain terms, we have to realize that the life that we experience, the outer life, is not like a series of random events. They're not separated by any means necessary, right? We know that this happens and we know that this happens over there. And sometimes you'll see it unfold in conversation. So I ask you, like, hey, how are you doing? Or how was your day? And you'll say that I had a bad day. But when we start talking about it, it's not that you had a bad day. You just had a bad event that happened in that day, right? So now when I continue to go into like what made that event so bad, and then sometimes in conversation, what you'll find is it really wasn't a bad event. It's just, you didn't like the outcome of it. But that's kind of separate from this because ideally what we have to realize is that everything that we experience is not like a series of separate events. It is a visible addition of your inner life. It is almost like you being the projector and you're displaying the movie right before you, right before your very eyes. So that said, thought is not something that happens in your life. Thought is the thing your life is made of. Now, I think that's important for us to digest because just that alone should make me go back and consider and process not just the thoughts, but the foundation and the assumption behind every thought that I'm having. But I think as we continue, there was a young man named James Allen. And if you've read this book, also, it's a very short read, but I think it's a very good read. And James Allen said that a man is literally what he thinks, his character being literally, and I say it again, his character being the complete sum of all of his thoughts. And you'll find that in the book of As a Man Thinketh. Now, I think that's important as well because what we a lot of times, some of you probably know it, some of you may not know it, either or it's fine. But I think we have to go back and realize that he sourced that from what Solomon wrote out of the Bible. And Solomon said in Proverbs 23:7 that as a man thinketh, so is he. And I think that's key. For as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. And that really hits home because if we really like take a step back and look at the life that we're currently living and consider like our most dominant thoughts, we can literally see it being painted on the canvas. But I'll go a step further because researchers at Queen's University in Canada estimated that the average person experiences roughly 6,000 thought transitions every single day. 6,000 a day. And you consciously choose how many of them? Hmm. That's not a river. That's not a river. If I can just be honest with you, that's not a river that you're steering. That's a river that you're in. It's like if I'm having 6,000 thoughts in a day, but I'm not consciously choosing all 6,000 of them, then they are guiding my life. I'm not necessarily the one that's guiding it. So I think that is something that we should all process and consider. Because if we don't, then it's like we continue to live this life day by day. It's the rat race, day in and day out. Every day looks the same. Then if every day looks the same, every week looks the same, and every week looks the same, then it has to, grow into a month. And then next thing you know, months turns to years, and we're living the exact same life over and over again. And that's pretty boring to me. I don't know about you, but that's pretty boring. So I think for me, if thoughts are really building people's lives, then why do so many good-hearted people end up with lives that don't match their hearts? I want to, in considering this question, I want to kind of go back and consider what we perceive to be good-hearted people. Is it that they have no intention on doing harm to somebody else? Is it that they have positioned themselves to live a very gray life? I don't want to go too much this side to sound like an activist. I don't want to go too much this side to where I have no care whatsoever. How do we define good hearted people? And I think in that definition of good hearted people, I think that now moves us to the point to where we can look at a person's life and realize that their life don't match their heart, or does it? So I think that's the trick. I think our perception of good hearted also gives us a perception of the life that we should be living. My perception of myself is that I'm a good hearted person, and I'm looking at my life, you know, does it reflect that? Sure, it does. Absolutely. But it is all based upon my perception of good heart. Where did I get the understanding of good heart from? And I believe in the Bible, and the Bible tells me that none is good but God. So if none is good but God, and from if none is good but God, and I'm considering myself to be a good-hearted person, then what I'm really saying is that my heart is patterned after His will and after His plan and after His instructions. And if that be true, then the outcome of my life should reflect that. So that's just kind of like where I am as it pertains to this. But I just don't want to leave it there. I want you guys to consider this question that I have for you, because at the end of the day, I want you to think about I want you to think about one area of your life that has looked basically the same for the past 3 years, good or bad. Now, ask yourself, what have you been saying to yourself about the area for those same 3 years? And I just want you to notice. That's all. Just notice it. Don't try to make any changes just yet. Just notice the match. Notice the connection between the conversation that you were having about that thing and how that thing has manifested itself. Okay. And I think you'll learn something about yourself in that regard. Now, if you notice, that is the completion of talking point one. All of my talking points tend to follow the same pattern. And that's how they're going to go moving forward. Right. So I want you guys to get ready, because each one of these talking points, they're going to have a question for you. Okay. Each talking point is going to have a question for you. And I want you to be honest with yourself. You can put your response in the comment section. You can write your response down for yourself. Either or, that's up to you. It's your call. I'm not really mandating one way or the other. But that takes me to talking point number 2. You don't live by decisions. You live by patterns. Now, I know some people will be like, wait, that's not true. That's not true. I make decisions all the time. Sure you do. But have you not realized that your decisions a lot of times follow a particular pattern, especially in in an area of your life that you have not touched in a minute? It has followed a particular pattern. In fact, let's just go here. When we go back and look at those 6,000 thoughts that we were talking about previously, those thoughts don't stay thoughts. Repeated through, they those thoughts don't stay thoughts. Repeated though hardens, repeated thoughts hardens into patterns, and patterns run your day without asking your permission. Most of your life is not being decided. It is being replayed. So you're literally living on autopilot. And I know that most of you know this already, but you're living on autopilot. In fact, I go a step further, and I want to bring out this quote, and I want you to pay close attention to it, because it says here, we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not an act, but a habit. Now, for those of you, and well, I just say it like this. Most people would tell you that Aristotle actually said that. He didn't. Historian Will Durant wrote that in 1926, summarizing Aristotle, however. And I'm telling you that on purpose because it proves just really my point, if I'm being completely transparent with you. Millions of people have repeated that attribution without ever checking it. That's how the mind works. Whatever gets repeated gets believed, and whatever gets believed gets lived. Now, I think that's important for us to process because psychologist Wendy Wood at USC ran studies where people recorded what they were doing every hour, finding about 43% of daily actions were performed out of habit, done almost daily in the same context while thinking about something else. Nearly half your day is happening within you. And the sad part about it is we don't really know or even consider that. So for me, if patterns are that powerful, does that mean people are just prisoners of their programming? That who they've been is who they'll always be? So to this question, the first part of it, I have to say yes. But I mean, being a mindset coach, the second part, I have to say no. But the caveat to that being no is that they have to make a decision and they have to act. Because if you don't make a decision and act on the decision that you made to change the programming, then you're going to be exactly what the second half says. You will continue to be the same person that you've been day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year. Again, we have to be consciously aware of those things that we do and then make the necessary efforts to do them. That's what makes feedback so valuable. That's what makes coaching so valuable. And when we make the decision not to, we've just made the decision to stay the same. It doesn't matter about any other excuses that we can come up with. They're simply excuses that promote stagnation. Now, I want for you, as you're looking at this question, I want you to walk through yesterday. I want you to go hour by hour in your mind. And this may not be something you can do right now because I'm going to continue to talk and I'm going to distract you. So I want you to capture this for yourself. Walk through yesterday. Go hour by hour in your mind. And I want you to think about how much of it did you actually decide? Think about everything that took place yesterday and how much of it is simply, it just happened. It happened the way it happened the day before. And where does your autopilot fly you? Let that sit in for a second, because I think this is something that when you start looking into it, it becomes very important to you for your life so that you can make the necessary change. Now, keep in mind, I told you the first three talking points, we're going to be locked in. But we're going to be jiving, we vibing. Okay. So that being said, willpower keeps losing because it was never the right weapon. Now, if you've been with me, you've heard me say this before, because in essence, I believe wholeheartedly it's true. Now, let's keep building this. Let's keep building this real quick because I think it's going to come full circle. Now, here's where it all comes together. If thoughts build your life, which is all about point one, and repeated thoughts run an autopilot, which is all about point two, then willpower is one conscious decision trying to out wrestle 43% automation and 6,000 daily thoughts. You haven't been weak. You've been outnumbered. The failure was never your discipline. It was the strategy. And if you consider all of that, it's like, man, I had no idea. Now, I think it's also important for us to consider something else because of a froward will was a lust made, and a lust served became custom, and custom not resisted became necessity. Now, that's a famous quote coming from Augustine out of his Confessions book, part 8, 1600 years ago. Listen to that. 1600 years ago. Augustine described the chain: choice, repetition, custom, necessity. By the time, excuse me, by the time it feels like necessity, willpower is showing up to fight that ended years ago. Willpower is showing up to a fight that ended years ago. So think about it. What does that really mean? That means that once you get to the point of something being important enough to make the necessary change, what you have put into practice over years will fight against that thing that you know needs to change. And I think a lot of times all of us have experienced that. At least I know how. I can't speak for you. I know I've experienced that. And in that experience actually validates everything you just heard. So a study following over 1,000 New Year's resolutions, things of that nature. New Year's resolvers found that by 1 year, nearly half had abandoned their resolutions. And the broader research shows most people give up within the first month. Interesting. Every January proves my point at scale. Those aren't a million weak people. That's one broken strategy, mass produced. But yet, we keep making New Year's resolutions as if the resolution itself will resolve the situation that we're dealing with. So I wonder, was Paul wrestling with this in Romans chapter 7? For the good that I would, I do not, but the evil which I would not, that I do. Was the Apostle Paul confessing a willpower problem? I think he absolutely was. I think it's important for us to understand that, and I've been saying this for a very long time, wherever my attention goes, my energy flows, right? Attention flow, right? Wherever my attention goes, my energy flows. So if I put all of my attention, I'm just using this as an example. If I put all of my attention at my job, then all of my energy will flow toward job. And then by that same token, I will actually become a pretty good employee if that's the way I want to look at it. As it pertains to what Paul was talking about in Romans chapter 7, he was talking about a struggle that man goes through. The man, as Paul was depicting it, really wants to do good, but he can't do good under his own willpower because he's at turmoil. He's fighting against himself. And it's not so much as a willpower thing because the Bible depicts that the thing that I'm fighting against lives within my flesh. So I can want to do good all I want to, but this thing will always get a vote. And as much as I try to move forward, this thing will keep pulling me back. So he gives us the solution to the problem, right? He tells us what the solution to the problem that man faces, where it's located at, and how to get to it, and that's found in Romans chapter 8. So yes, this is one of the things that Paul was admitting, but it wasn't just Paul, the great Paul, as I have it written here. It wasn't just that Paul struggles with that. This is everybody's struggle. The thing that you really want to do, you sometimes find it hard to do it simply because, oh, well, I'll do it tomorrow. I'm tired. I had a long day at work. I have a headache. I just, every excuse that we can come up with under the sun. And it's not really you that's planning to make the excuse an excuse. It's really this thing that's fighting against the thing that you say you want to do because you found this space of comfort. We call it a comfort zone. So anytime you try to move outside of that comfort zone, this thing will say, hey, you know what? I like the comfort zone. Can we just stay here for a second? Can we just kind of hang out? One more day won't hurt, right? We done this for the past 10 or more years. Let's do it for one more year. Let's do it for one more day. And then one day turns to 1 week and so forth and so on. So I want you to kind of consider this for yourself, because as you process this question, I believe is going to kind of help you move forward. I want you to bring to mind the change you've attempted the most times in your life. Doesn't really matter what it is, whether it's losing weight, reading more books, making more money, whatever that looks like. I want you to kind of bring to mind the change you've attempted the most times in your life. The one you've restarted over and over. Now, I want you to be honest here. Every time it collapsed, who did you blame? Now, let me pause right here, because if your first inclination is say, I didn't blame anybody, I'm talking to you. I want to be transparent. I want to be honest. If your first response immediately is to say, I didn't blame anybody, not so fast. Back up. Because here's the thing. The reason behind something actually happening is, in essence, the reality behind how I see the world. So if, for whatever reason, and I'm just going to use this as a very simple analogy, I go to drink this bottle, I go to drink some water, cap is closed, and I put it to my mouth, and I realize at a later point in time, the cap is closed. And my response is, I didn't get to drink water because the cap was closed. I just blamed the bottle. I say again, I just blamed the bottle. Blame the bottle. when the most accurate response is that I didn't get to drink water because I failed to open the cap. That is always how it works. Everything has to be looked at from the internal aspect of me. So again, the question is, who did you blame? And what did calling yourself undisciplined, if you ever got to that point, right? If you've ever called yourself undisciplined, what did that cost you? What did that cost you that examining your strategy might have saved? Now think about it. If and I don't want to just leave it at undisciplined. It's anything that has to do with a name that you've called yourself. I can't believe I did that. How stupid of me, right? So what did it cost me to call myself stupid as opposed to wait, let me examine the strategy that I used and consider a better strategy that I could have used. That would have been a better use of that would have been a better use of my resources in the scope of time so that I can better analyze me drinking water. Okay. Now, this to me is where everything changes because I believe wholeheartedly that this is the most important aspect of the entire conversation. And we're getting into it. We're getting into the most important aspect of this conversation. God's design was never suppression, it was replacement. Now, what do I mean when I say that? Well, you go back to my favorite scripture, be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, which is Romans 12, chapter 2. Notice what God did not say. He didn't say, be ye restrained, be ye quiet, be ye seated. He didn't say any of those things. He said, be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. Now, renewal is not gritting your teeth against old thought patterns and mindsets and things of that nature. It is installing a new one. It's like, I want you guys to think about renovating a house. Now, in a perfect world, we'll get a house for, you know, a very low price. That's a perfect scenario. And then when we go and do our due diligence, we go inspect that house. That house in a perfect world will only need a cosmetic makeover. Maybe $10,000, $15,000 max, right? But the worst case scenario, we got to rip out all the drywall to get behind the drywall to see what's going on. We haven't even assessed the reality of the problem yet. We had to rip out the drywall to see it. We rip out the drywall, we discover that there's mold that is literally on the studs. So now, and it's not just a spot, it's like massive mold. So now we have to rip all the drywall out. We got to do mold remediation. Oh yeah, by the way, we got to make sure that the roof is still good. And we also need to check the foundation. So now we literally had to do a total gut job. We had to gut everything out of that house so we can get to the point of rebuilding it to the standard that we like, that we want it to be. That's exactly what renewing your mind is all about. That's really what it's all about. It is a total gut. You can't just I'll say it like this. In Ephesians chapter 4, let's look at that one. Paul spells out some mechanics. And I want to make sure that I kind of bring these up. There we go. Paul spells out some mechanics. Now, I want you to go look at Ephesians chapter 4 for yourself because renewal is not gritting your teeth against the old mind. It is installing a new one. Paul spells out the mechanics in Ephesians chapter 4. Put off the old man, be renewed in the spirit of your mind. Put on the new man. Put off, renew, put on. That's not suppression. That is replacement. The old thought doesn't leave because you fight it. It leaves because something greater has moved in. Now, there is a famous quote that came from a Scottish preacher named Thomas Chalmers, and he built his most famous sermon on exactly this. It is titled "The Explosive Power of a New Affection." And this took place in the early 1800s. And his argument is that the heart cannot be emptied of an old love by force. It can only be displaced by the entrance of a stronger one. You don't drive darkness out of a room. You turn on a light. Now, when you really let that sink in, Romans 12:2 and Ephesians 4 should make a whole lot of sense at this point. Because a lot of times what we've been trying to do is we've been trying to, what we what they would call in the real estate industry, put lipstick on a pig, right? Or put a put a little a coat of paint over top of it to try to cover up the blemishes. But that's not what the Bible called us to do. The Bible called us to do something greater. It called us to renew our mind, to replace old thoughts with new, better thoughts, more spiritual thoughts. And I think that kind of changes the way we look at things. That makes us question our very approach to the things that we have been doing. Because unfortunately, if we're honest with ourselves, those things haven't been working. Now, this is where modern neuroscience caught up to the Apostle Paul. The famous study of London taxi drivers in 2000 found that years of navigating the city physically enlarged the memory centers of their brains, adult brains, measurably rebuilt by repeated use. Neuroscientists summarize the principle as what fires together wires together. Science calls it neuroplasticity. Paul called it renewal, and he called it 2,000 years earlier. Your brain was built to be rebuilt. That's not motivation. That is a strategic divine design. So for me, what does replacement actually look like for someone? If fighting a thought doesn't work, what does a person actually do with it? Well, number one, I will start off by saying this mind that created the problem is also the mind that cannot solve the problem because the old thoughts are constantly competing against the potentiality of new thoughts. So I need somebody outside of me to actually help me with the new thoughts, thinking outside the box, right? So now, if I have where someone is trying to help me renew my mind because they're giving me feedback and observations, they're sharing with me different ways of doing things, so forth and so on. They're challenging assumptions and conversation. That's number one. So the awareness piece is the key. I must become aware of the thing I do not know so that I can actually, so that I can discover a plan to fix that thing. That's for starters. When we get to the point of being open to feedback, with denying ourselves the immediate rejection of whatever it is that we hear, or giving ourselves the grace that we don't give other people, because we'll give ourselves grace in a heartbeat. We'll quickly say, I don't do that. I don't do that. I don't do that. Stop. You don't know that. Why not ask somebody, hey, do I do that? When I'm around you, do I cut you off in conversation? Do I? Yeah, ask questions. Have somebody else give you the feedback. Because in your mind, I promise you, and unless you've gotten to that point in your life, and again, kudos to you guys because most of you guys have. I thoroughly believe that. At least everybody who's watching it. That's why you're watching the show, right? But if you've gotten to that point in your mind where you've humbled yourself enough, humbled yourself to the point to where you look for feedback, you look for people to give you valuable feedback so that you can continue to grow and things of that nature. Great, great. Continue to do that, but be more intentional about it now because feedback alone is not the answer. Remember, feedback is only awareness. That's one thing. Now, what do we do after we understand the awareness? I'm not going to go into that tonight because that's another conversation. If someone is fighting a thought and they realize fighting that thought does not work, what does a person actually do? They need to discover the new thought that they need to have. The problem is the new thought that you need to have is written someplace or comes from someone else. And then you need an accountability partner that helps you challenge that old thought by rooting that old thought out. In other words, like we said previously, if it's dark in a room, you don't push the dark out the room, you turn the light on. So now, what is that new thought that is actually going to replace that old thought? And I think that's the important part. For you, I want you, each each of you, I want you to look back at any, and I'll say it again, I want you to look back at any real change that ever stuck in your life. The one that didn't require white knuckles after a while. Be honest about what actually happened. What did you defeat? Did you defeat the old thing? Or did something new quietly take its place? What was the new affection that did the expelling? Okay. I want you guys to take your time and answer that for yourselves. Again, not tonight, because tonight I'm gonna keep going, and I want this stuff to be good. I want this stuff to be good for you. I want this stuff to be continually work for you. However, brings us to our last talking point. Our last talking point kind of feeds off of what I was just saying, because you can't renew what you can't see. So renewal begins with measurement. I say again, renewal begins with measurement. Now, before I go any further, I want you guys, listen, if you are enjoying the show, if you have enjoyed the show, I want you to hit the like button. I want you to also put in the comment section, tell me how much you're enjoying the show. Because again, I hope it has eye opening. Like I said, some of the stuff I know you guys have heard before, especially if you've been around the Mindset Academy for an extended period of time, because a lot of these things we talked about. If you are new, I hope this resonates with you. Also, remember the community support banner is up. So again, whatever you give this community, we greatly appreciate that. And it continues to go towards the great and wonderful things that we're continually building right now in this community. Now, that said, I think it's important for us to kind of lean deep into this right here. Everything tonight leads here. And I want you to kind of consider, as I'm saying, everything that I'm about to say. Okay. Everything leads here. If renewal is replacement, you must know what needs replacing. And that's precisely where most of us fail before we start, because the mind cannot audit itself casually. David didn't try, he prayed. He said, "Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my thoughts." You'll find that in the book of Psalms, specifically Psalms 139, verse 23. And I think David gave us a blueprint that actually makes sense. I want to kind of put it up here. Search, try, know. That's measurement language. Transformation does not begin with effort. It begins with an honest reading. Again, there's a difference between being and doing. And a lot of us focus more on the doing. We want to know, what do we need to do? I need to do this. I need to do that. Well, here's the deal. We've been doing things wrong for a long time. So now we need to reverse it, right? Please don't say Miss Ellen. We need to reverse it. We need to go back and kind of like reverse engineer. Go back to the beginning of doing. Everything that I do begins with a thought. So now I have to fix the thought in order to fix the do. But what we want to do is you tell me what I need to do, and we hope that what I do will fix the thought. Doesn't work that way. Okay. We have to the point to where we fix the thought. And once we fix the thought, now the do will change. It's just this is key when we really stop and think about it. Because that said, I think Socrates says something that is really key for all of us. The unexamined life is not worth living. 2,400 years ago, a philosopher said examination is worth dying for. He did. And most of us won't even spend 8 minutes on it. See, in conjunction with that, organizational psychologist Tasha Eurich research team, and this was published in the Harvard Business Review back in 2018, found that while 95% of people believe they're self-aware, I want you guys to kind of consider that. 95% of people believe that they are self-aware. Only about 10 to 15% of them actually are. 95% believe it. 10 to 15% live it, which means the odds say the blind spot in your life is exactly where you're not looking. That's not an insult. That is an invitation. So I think as we go forward, I want you guys to see something. In this question, why do you think people avoid measuring themselves? Even people who genuinely want to grow, what are they actually afraid the mirror will say? Well, let's back up. The first part of the question is fear. What do they fear? I think a lot of times people fear what they're going to learn about themselves. That's for starters. I think that's the scariest one of them all. We fear what we'll learn about ourselves. That's number one. I think number two, I think people they fear what someone else has the potential to learn about me. That's number two. And then number three is the simple stuff, in my opinion. They fear how much it costs. They fear, what they're going to lose, things of that nature. My response is always simple. My response is this: the price isn't the issue, the cost is the issue. The price triggers the law of sacrifice. The cost is what you lose in the long run if you don't exercise the law of sacrifice. I can't make that any clearer. The price only means that you're serious. And if I can't be serious about me, then I can't be serious about anything else. I surely can't be serious about anybody else. I'm kidding myself if I believe otherwise. See, when I hold a mirror up to my face, I get to see all my blemishes. I get to see the people see when they see me. Not the story that I tell them about me, hoping that my story convinces them that that's who I really am. I really get to see who you see when you see me. See, that's really what the International Love Chapter is about. I joke about it all the time, but I think it's true. And we all know it. 1 Corinthians chapter 13. Love is patient, love is blind. Keep reading all the way through. He said, now looking in the glass darkly, a mirror. Now I see as I have been seen. I think everybody under the sound of my voice, under the sound of your voice, under the sound of that other person's voice, everybody needs to take a look in the mirror, not just once, on a regular basis. We need to look in the mirror so we can see how we are representing the Most High, if that's who you represent. See how you're representing your name. See how you're representing your family name. See how you're representing your spouse. See how you're representing whatever you stand for, because that is the thing that people see. A lot of times we want the words to matter. And a lot of times what we don't realize is that the words don't matter until what people see matter. No one cares how much you know until they know how much you care. They need to see the thing. And when they see what they see in you and what they see lines up with what they're hearing, you're believable. You're trustworthy. But if they see a thing and that thing is inconsistent with what you're saying, then you're untrustworthy and they can't believe a word that's coming out of your mouth. So for you, I want you to kind of look at it like this. If your closest friend, the one who loves you enough to tell you the truth, describe the real pattern you're thinking over the last year, what one word would they use that you've been avoiding? After you get that word, I want you to sit with that word. That word is probably your starting line. Let that sit in. Okay. Again, all great action plans for you guys to kind of implement as we get ready to close out for this evening. Now, I want, after all of these things we talk about, because I want you to kind of think about it. Again, we talked, your life is the printouts of your thoughts. We went from there and we touched on the next one, which was, why did I miss it? There we go. We went to the next one that says, you don't live by decision, you live by patterns. And then the next one was all about willpower. Willpower keeps losing because it was never the right weapon. And then the next one, God's design was never suppression, it was replacement. And that brings us to here. You can't renew what you can't see. So renewal begins with measurement. And as we get ready to close out, I want you guys to process that. I want you to think about it wholeheartedly. I want you to think deep into it, because you thinking deep into that becomes is an interesting starting point for you. So now let's put the whole journey on the table. Your thoughts are building your life. Those thoughts run in patterns you did not consciously choose. That's why willpower keeps losing. It was never the weapon. God's design is replacement, not suppression. And replacement begins with one thing: seeing clearly what needs to be replaced. Which brings me to what I promised you at the top of the show. I built a tool, and you'll find it here. I built a tool called the Mind Renewal Index. In other words, in short, it's an MRI. 36 questions, about 8 minutes anchored in scripture. It measures your mind across 6 dimensions: awareness, alignment, accountability, application, action, and advancement. And here's the part that matters. Your lowest dimension is your starting line, not where I started, where you start. Renewal begins at the point of the greatest resistance. So even if you're on your phone and you can't scan this QR code, just go to the mindsetcoach.academy/renew. I'll say again, the mindsetcoach.academy/renew. That's slash renew, RENEW. Free, 8 minutes. And I'll send you the results. I'll send you your results with your recommended first step. Because here's the truth, family. Watching this episode by itself created awareness, but measuring creates movement. Don't let tonight be one more good thought that autopilot erases by Thursday. Renew your mind, transform your life. I'm Dwayne Dwyer, and I'll see you guys next week when we go into I'm Dwayne Dwyer, and I'll see you guys next week when we go deep into Dimension 1, why you can't renew what you can't see. Until then, let the best version of yourself be a blessing to somebody else, and I will see you guys next week.
Mindset shift, we move. Mindset shift, new groove. Coach's Corner with